Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite hairy, huggable homos to talk films, either current or classic. And this week, we've got a whole bunch of current films coming your way. Some so current, they're not even out for mass consumption yet. We're going to be talking about some films coming out of South by Southwest Film Festival, which recently wrapped, coming out of Austin, Texas. It happened online this year. We've got a whole lot to talk about with regards to South by, but we're also going to be having a discussion around Justice League, the Snyder Cut. It's been out for a hot minute at this point. We've got some hot takes on the Snyder Cut to share with you, and we'd love to hear your thoughts too. So for everyone that's joining us live right now, welcome. So glad to have you with us. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know what you thought of the Snyder Cut. If you hang around for our South by discussion, and we certainly hope you will. We're going to put a lot of great films on your radar. Definitely let us know what sounds interesting. All of that said, you've listened to me talk for long enough. Let me introduce you to my wonderful co-hosts who are here with me in the virtual studio. Jim Pugliafico is here as usual. Hey, sweetheart. How's it going?
Hey, I am here. Thank you for that introduction. All that said about me, I'm glad to be here, babe, of course. And man, we've got a jam-packed show tonight. Lots of movies are gonna be discussed, especially in the South by section, and then of course the big one with Zack Snyder's Justice League, which this little movie that came out a couple weeks ago, and people might want to talk about.
People might have small thoughts. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. They might have a little something to say. Yeah,
Maybe. Well, welcome. Glad to have you, babe. Will Lindis is here with us as well. Will, coming all the way from Austin, Texas. Speaking of South by Southwest. How are things in Austin, Will?
Things are pretty decent here in Austin right now. Normally about now, I would be sort of reeling in the aftermath of South by Southwest. I'd be going downtown and watching as like some of the flyers for the different like shows and the venues are still kind of up. Some of which, hadn't been taken down yet. Just sort of like in that, I'd be like going like, Brad and Jim, it's been a couple of weeks since I last saw you. Man, feels like it was just yesterday. But we don't get that this year. We do have a virtual version of it, and that sure is something. So I'm pretty excited to dive in. Even though you all didn't get to come to Austin, it feels like Austin got to come to you this year.
Indeed. And who knows what things will look like next year. Hopefully, with a whole lot more people being vaccinated, we'll be able to be back in Austin for South by. Fingers crossed. That would be phenomenal. Will, I think this is the first year in like 8 years we haven't seen you in the span of a calendar year. What the fuck?
That's absolutely true. And that's also very unfortunately a thing that I can say about literally everyone in my life.
Right.
But yeah, it does feel weird because we do this every week. We get to hang out with one another, and even in between shows, we're chatting and sharing like, what are we gonna do this week? Check this out. How you doing? Like all that stuff, and that's all great, and I love that, and I cherish that. But it's nice to have the in-person time, for us to go like hit up the Whataburger together at 2 a.m. after a super late screening, or for us to like walk like 47 miles across Austin to try to find a place where we can grab a quick sandwich. I miss those. I miss that so much. So soon, very soon.
Honey butter chicken biscuits and taquitos.
Oh yeah, there's the food for sure, Will, but just hanging out with you and Scott and the pups, and getting to do that, and really, we'll talk about how wonderful the festival was this year, but we definitely missed the buzz of like what, 1 million people or whatever it is, hundreds of thousands of people gathering in Austin, all to celebrate, film, music, education, virtual arts, everything. And kind of that buzz is missing in my little corner of the room over here, my recliner, as I'm pressing buttons and finding movies, South by movies on the TV. But but we're still grateful, right? Obviously, we'll get into
absolutely
what we actually got.
Absolutely. I will say Jim is fully vaccinated at this point. His efficacy is all over the hump of fullness. I just got my second shot a few days ago. Will, I know you recently got yours, so we're going to be as protected as we can be soon. Hopefully that means we can get back into movie theaters at some point, when that feels comfortable. But by the time March rolls around next year, I hope we can. Even if South by is happening online again for some reason, like maybe we can still come to Austin. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
That would be wonderful. If that could work out, then if it's a virtual South by Southwest and we're still in a bubble for whatever reason, well then come be a part of this bubble. I have internet. I have internet. I have TV. We can make work.
We'll bring our projector and the screen because you've got a huge living room, and we can set that up, and we'll binge movies all week. It'll be good times.
Yes.
Hey, we've got some folks in the live chat. Hamstracked is here with us.
Oh,
hey, Hammy, welcome.
Hey,
hello.
So glad to come back and see him in our chat.
Oh
with
yeah,
us when we do these. Yeah.
For sure. And everyone else, feel free to say hi and let us know your thoughts as we dive in here. We are going to be talking quite a bit about South by, but before we do that, we are going to dish all about the Snyder Cut first. And a little different from our normal format. Typically, we talk about a film for about 45 minutes. We do a whole 20-minute spoiler-free section, 25 minutes of spoilers. Pretty much everyone who's going to see this has probably seen it at this point. So we're going to jump into this discussion. We'll do a little bit of brief setup, but everything's going to be full bore spoilers right from the get-go. So if you haven't seen Justice League, the Snyder Cut yet, just be aware we are going to be talking spoilers. You may not care since it's a recut of a movie that already came out. Maybe you do. I don't know, but just take that under advisement. Jim, Will, are you ready to jump back into a film we saw 3 years ago and we saw a new cut of again over the span of 4 hours or 4 days, depending on how you watched it?
You know what?
Yeah,
I
think so.
In this case, let's find out if justice really is gray, as tagline says.
Yeah, so it really just comes down to whether it's worth talking about again. If there's enough there, enough more meat on the bone to talk about, and I think there is. So we'll get into it.
All right, sounds good. Well, then here we go. Our discussion of Justice League, the Snyder Cut. All right, so Will, for anyone who is somehow not familiar, and no worries if you're not, folks at home, with the Snyder Cut, what is this? Why is it getting buzz? And why the fuck are we talking about Justice League again?
Yeah. So a very mini history lesson. So Zack Snyder is the director and sort of like helmsman for the DC cinematic universe, right? So Man of Steel comes out and Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice comes out, and the latter of which is not very well reviewed at the time, right? And the next movie up is Justice League, which is already in the process of production when Dawn of Justice comes out. At the same time, very unfortunately, there's a death in Zack Snyder's family. His daughter dies, and both he and his wife, who also was working on the movie, they stepped away from the project, deservedly so. Very tragic situation. So at this point, Warner and DC is sort of like, well, we're going to use this opportunity. We know the reviews were kind of bad on the last one, and Zach had to step away. So let's pull in Joss Whedon to come in and fix the ship. Joss Whedon does a bunch of reshoots, does a bunch of different things. 2017 Justice League comes out and it tanks. It does not do very well. It's critically panned. Zack Snyder starts saying, like on Twitter and in interviews, like, I have a cut of this movie. I have my own cut. And it turns into this whole hashtag movement. Hashtag release the Snyder cut. Release the Snyder cut. It got enough traction to where it kind of became a meme, but then it became a bit of a movement. And finally, with the HBO Max as a home platform, they were starving for like new content. and this was a great opportunity to work with Zack Snyder to make that Snyder cut. Now, it ended up not being like a cut that he had just sort of like sitting on the shelf. He ended up having to like, it was like still like a, I believe, $75 million budget for this new version of Justice League, which was, I believe, only something like 1/8 of the original footage. The rest was stuff that was already in the can or needed effects or even some reshoots. Either way, Zack Snyder puts together this new version, which he releases on HBO Max just this week. So if you're confused, I thought I already watched that movie. Yes, you have. And also, no, you haven't, because this is both the exact same story, but also a very, 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 very different version of that story. So from the perspective of someone who didn't love the first one, it became sort of a hard pill to swallow whether I'd even want to do this. But as someone who's fascinated by the process and just how all of this sort of like came to life, it was really interesting to just sort of see how different it actually would be.
Yeah, Will, it's interesting that you bring that up, because going in, I was kind of like, man, 4 hours really for a movie that we already saw? Like, how different could this possibly be? And I was like, are we just going to have like shots of the same stuff from different angles and like recolorized? But I was really shocked that so much of this film was different. We had an entirely new villain who like was not really part of the original story. All these different things like happened, and I was just like, what? Like the whole Cyborg storyline. Cyborg became the heart of this film, and I was totally here for it. Hardly any of the Cyborg stuff was in the Joss Whedon version. How do you make a decision to cut all of that out? It was, I don't know. It was crazy.
And there is a lot of you can go down that rabbit hole as well, because there is a lot that is not only happened during production, but is still playing out in the news right now between Whedon and, of course, the actor
Fisher.
that played Cyborg, Ray Fisher. And that's still playing out too, and also tragic and also unfortunate and kind of frustrating to see what played out and kind of how people responded to it. Yeah. It's really interesting. Like, this is a case study. Like, it's a movie. It's an entertainment property. It's a blockbuster. It's superheroes doing superhero things. It's all of those kind of light descriptions. But at the same time, like, I feel like you could teach a class just on the what the fuck happened with this movie and the behind the scenes and just all of the production and marketing and hashtags that became of it. Like, as someone who, as we'll talk about here, maybe wasn't as big a fan of maybe either cuts of the movie, I would attend the hell out of that class. Class.
There's definitely a lot there. I mean, we haven't yet actually talked about how we liked or didn't like the new movie, and that's fine. We're definitely going to get to that. But Will, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's just an interesting case study. And like, going into this film, this new 4-hour version, I had no idea what to expect, right? I know, okay, it's going to be more Zack Snyder-y, maybe darker, more serious toned stuff. But I was like legitimately shocked at how different the tone of the movie felt, how much content there was there. It wasn't, like you said, Brad, as we may have thought, it wasn't just like, extended fight scenes, although I know we probably got some of that too, but there were like whole different elements of the storyline that were folded back into this big cake that we got, at the end. And 4 hours, that's a long movie. I think at the end of it, we're like, it's a shame they had to like put this out as a 4-hour product, and they maybe couldn't have, if things were different back then, if things hadn't played out like they did, maybe this could have been like a 2-parter, and done really well as a really good, 2-hour kind of presentation. Because 4 hours is a lot for me, and I think it's a lot for a lot of people. By the end, I was a little bit numb from just like kind of like pummeled to death. But Yeah, we'll get to that. Kind of how we liked it, but like you said, well, it's an interesting case study. I was blown away by the differences. I think a lot of the stuff that was done differently in this one worked well. I thought they improved the film in a lot of ways, except for the length, which we'll talk about.
It's interesting. Yeah, well, that's true. But it's interesting about the length of this film. A lot of people, at least on social media that I've been seeing, are like, "Man, I really don't want to watch a 4-hour version of a movie that I already saw." And then those same people are watching the Snyder cut, and they're like, "Well, this is like almost a completely different movie. Like, I'm so glad that I saw this, even if I didn't love it. At least I get to see." The director's original vision. We get to see Ray Fisher in most of the scenes that he shot. By the way, I think it's fucking criminal that so much of his footage and story was cut out of the film. Whether you love the Snyder cut or not, it's just so great to see that restored. But I think that 4-hour length is just a big roadblock for a lot of people. I do appreciate what HBO tried to do in breaking it into chapters. Right. So that you could kind of digest it. Jim, I know when we watched it, we watched half the movie in chapters. We watched a chapter over lunch, then we watched a chapter over dinner, then the next day a chapter over lunch, and then I think at night we finished the other 3 chapters. Jim, was it watching the last 3 chapters in one go that made you feel pummeled, or was it watching it over multiple days that made you feel that way? That's what I'm curious.
I think probably watching that last, the chapters seemed rather arbitrary to me. They didn't. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but they didn't seem to make inherent, like, logical, essential logical sense. Like, they didn't. I don't think they needed to be there. They didn't really provide a break. I mean, what were they, like 5-second placards that showed on the screen? I don't know if people were going to use that the way we used a couple of them to, like, have dinner or whatever. But I didn't care for that so much because it just seemed, okay, that's another chapter, but it doesn't really make sense why you're doing it. It's a little distracting. It was a little distracting. Like, oh, should this chapter be about something else? Or is it just a continuation of the same story? Which I think for me, it felt like is what it ended up being.
And the truth of the matter is we'll never know what the original Snyder cut would have been back in 2017. Well, because realistically, they would not have released a 4-hour movie there, and they wouldn't have split this into the 2 halves. I don't believe they would have at that time. I think they would have kind of like in a post-Endgame world, but this was before that that happened. So what probably would have happened is there probably would have been a 3-hour cut of this movie that we just saw that would have left something on the table. I think that Snyder really benefits from the fact that the hashtag was so popular, and there was this 4 years of a lot of times you when you get a chance to like screen a movie for an audience, it's like in a test like audience situation, and so that's the feedback. But he got to have literally millions of people's worth of feedback sort of like cycling in his head as he did his sort of like recut for this thing too. So it's really interesting. Like the Snyder cut like that existed then does not exist. What we have is the Snyder cut of hindsight, which is also super freaking interesting to sort of talk about. Like I can't think of another situation where we've had exactly this scale of this type of remake of a movie by the same filmmaker in such a short period of time.
Well, and it's interesting too, and I keep saying it's interesting because there's so much interesting about this process and how this is maybe impacting the film industry or not. But there's a new hashtag out, Restore the Snyderverse. And so a lot of people now, having seen how this story went, they're craving more. This was originally supposed to be a trilogy. By the way, this was going to be the first part of 3 films, including the whole apocalyptic end-of-world Batman with an evil Superman thing that we saw in The Stinger at the end of the Snyder Cut. And so now people want the Whedon movie, like erased from the multiverse, and the Snyder version, being restored, right, as a launching point for additional movies. Snyder's gone on record at this point of saying he has no plans to do that. But do you think that the fan outcry could push that into existence?
What's hard for me to understand is there was back when the first inklings of a Snyder cut came, bubbled to the surface. I was in the I'm a skeptic, right? I was in the skeptics camp. Like, come on, there's no fucking Snyder cut. You guys are making shit up. If there is a Snyder cut, it's probably just the shit that should have stayed out of the movie. Not completed. It's not ever going to come to anything. And then, the fan outcry became really strong. And then I think things started leaking out like, oh, I guess maybe there is a Snyder cut after all. Like there is something there. And, I was one of the ones at the end who, I was eating my words a little bit. Like there really was something here. I will go on record and say, I think this is a better film for what we got this time. Is it a great film for me? No, absolutely not. The first one I didn't like very much at all. And this one, I'm not a huge fan. I'm not going to go back and watch the damn thing. But like, I thought it was improved. It definitely improved it. And I know probably fan base, it probably improved it a whole lot. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I just think it's a better film in general.
But Will, before you jump in with your thoughts on if you liked it, or I think you said you didn't like it as much, but would love to hear more on that. Jim, would you watch another Snyder Justice League movie as if the Snyderverse was restored? Would you continue watching films
when your husband is a Superman freak and anything DC wise that has something to do with Superman is going to be put on screen by Snyder? I think you're going to end up watching it. So yes, do I want to watch it? I think I'm interested. I'm interested to see where it go. Yeah.
All right. Will, how about for you? What are your thoughts on the film, and would you support a restored Snyderverse?
So the last part of it first, I've kind of come around on one part of this because there's a part of me that feels a little squishy about the idea of these like kind of loud, somewhat toxic, like Twitter movements going out there and sort of like demanding things of artists and studios from the perspective of, get this one out of here, get this one in here. In this case, it was probably the noblest of the ones, but we've seen it before. I mean, we've seen minority cast members of blockbusters get bullied off of social platforms by some of those same crowds, and it always makes me uncomfortable. But at the same time, I'm a comic book fan. And this whole thing about like sort of fandoms demanding things of the studios is kind of new to the scope that it is right now in movies, but maybe less so with comics, because there's always been movements for like letters pages, letter to the editors pages in your comic books. Like, why did you kill off so-and-so character? Please bring her back. Like, and that sort of interaction between the creators and the audiences is part and parcel to it. So, as a movie fan, I don't know, but as a comic book fan, like, okay, I get it. And I get it. As for how I felt about it, this is a much better movie than the 2017. I want to start with that. I was really skeptical. The trailers made it look like the same kind of bloated, self-important mess that the first one was. Even the last set of trailers, they look like shit. When I sat down and watched this thing, it has a much more focused point of view, to the point where this does feel like a cohesive movie, start to finish. Where all of the characters got to have their hand on the ball a little bit. I still have issues, and so it kind of keeps me from really loving it. It's better. It's better. I think Zack Snyder has a problem with characterizations. He's a much better director at finding moments than I think he is at finding like emotional core. Not to say there was none. I think that the cyborg material, when I really went back and kind of thought about it, I think the cyborg material was weaker than it came across on screen, just because Ray Fisher was so damn invested in trying to find those emotional beats. And I give more credit to Fisher than I do to Snyder there. And this is true for kind of all of his movies. You think about Watchmen. I don't think he's great at understanding what the material he's making, what it means or what it needs to mean. But I think he's really good at making cool moments. And we get to see that here. There are a bunch of like, you can pause the screen at any time and get like what would look like a badass splash page in a comic book. So I liked it a lot better. I get why people like really like it. I'm not one of those, but the 2017 one was the worst thing I saw that year. It was a mess of a movie. It was an editing nightmare. This feels like a long standard superhero movie with a few really cool moments in there. I'll never take away from a couple like really, really cool beats that are in this movie. It's just, there's so much space in between them that I started to check out a little bit before I had to get like pulled back in and check out and pull back in. So it's better. Good. I don't know, but it's way better.
How about you, babe?
Yeah, just want to hit on a couple things real quick. You both brought up the length again, and that's happening in our live chat as well. Our two Jameses are in the chat with us, and James number 1 says, I'm sure it would have been broken up into multiple different movies. And our other James, also from Austin, hi Austin James, says, I thought at one time the Snyder Cut was going to be released as a miniseries. That's why I thought the chapters were included. And yeah, I mean, to those points, I think, babe, for us, and Will, you too, if I had watched this as one 4-hour movie, I think my feelings on the film would be very different. I think by the end of the 4 hours, I'd have been probably bored and like wanting to go do something else. Like I'd been, very antsy. You can ask Jim. Oftentimes when he's like, do you want to watch a movie? I'm like, how long is it? And he's like, oh, it's 2 hours and 10 minutes. I'm like, nope, I'm going to go play video games.
For 3 hours.
Well, but the thing is, with video games, at least I can like pause and I can like go to the bathroom, or I can go to my computer and do stuff, or get on my phone for a little while. With a movie, you really have to be there and like invested in that process, right? Like sometimes we'll pick up our phones, but like that does pull you out of the movie. And anyway, so had I watched this in 4 hours, Brad in an alternate universe who did that, I'd love to know his thoughts. I'd love to see if it's different from what I think. But having watched it in multiple parts, kind of like a mini series, as James mentioned, I think really heightened the experience for me. I would say this is probably one of my favorite superhero movies ever. I fucking loved it for a lot of different reasons, and I'm not going to go into all of them here, but I feel like a lot of justice was done to the characters that wasn't done before. I know there's kind of a cringy moment with the Flash, like touching Iris's face. That is not one of my favorite moments. Yeah. But I do love a lot of the slow-mo with Flash, where like the world kind of freezes around him. I know, Marvel did that with Quicksilver in their films. We could get into the whole like Marvel versus DC thing, I guess. But one of the things that I've even enjoyed about the Flash TV show is just sort of seeing that like frozen world, or that like slow-mo thing. So it was really neat to see more of the Flash as less of like a comic relief. I mean, he still kind of served that purpose, but like he had some really serious moments too, like breaking his rule, going back in time, right, to try and save everybody. I wish we could have gone more into why he has that rule. Maybe that's coming in the standalone Flash movie. Comic fans know, of course, that's a reference to Flashpoint, but it was just cool to see that kind of put in. Really happy that the Batman Wonder Woman romance thing was kind of dropped for this film. That made me roll my eyes so hard in the first version. And finally, thank you, fucking Zack Snyder. I've been bitching at you for 8 years about how you've treated my man, Superman. I feel like he finally got some of Superman right. I won't say he got all of Superman right. But that moment when he's standing in the cornfield with Lois and that just blazing sunset is over the field, and like they're just talking about their feelings and each other and like his sort of journey back. That to me is Superman. Not flying, not fucking shooting lasers out of his eyes, not, ripping off the head of some evil demon, but like the heart of a man from a Kansas farm. Like, I don't know. Like, I cried in that moment. Our friend Kevin, who is staying with us, noticed that I was crying, and he like put his hand on my arm, like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm just ugly crying because Zack
What's the
Snyder did
matter with
Superman
you?
right." So I was so happy to see that. God, I could talk forever, but I just think that tons and tons of improvements with this version. It was great to finally see Darkseid show up through, Batman v Superman. This whole thing with Apocalypse and the parademons and Darkseid was being teased out when we got the original Justice League movie, and it was just fucking Steppenwolf. It was just such a huge letdown because there'd been so much buildup. So it was really, really cool to see Darkseid show up in the movie here. So to answer my own question about, hashtag restore the Snyderverse, I don't know if I'm quite there, but I am curious to see what else he would have done. My only wrinkle with that is evil Superman has been so overdone at this point in so many stories and animated films, and I don't know how much I would love to see Superman, after being done so well in this film,
We've
be
kind of
evil.
lost the essence of Superman.
Yeah,
right?
like we finally find that essence just to lose it again. I don't know that I'd be a fan of that, but this was a big win for me personally.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back a little bit to sort of like some of my issues, like in that I think that whole like final sequence lost the plot a little bit, because I know that it's sort of like setting up what the stuff is going to be, but when I struggle to find like Snyder finding like the core of the characters, the movie up until that point, I think that he still struggles to find the core of the characters. Like this was a Superman who is way closer than he's been in there, but this is also a still kind of like a grim, gritty, like most people frowning kind of world, and it just isn't quite. But it's closer. And I would have actually, for me, it's like I'm good with a no to the restore the Snyderverse, because I feel like you take that little like here's a look at the future section, the epilogue, and just throw it away. Like end the movie, like after, like honestly, end the movie where they're all standing and looking heroic, like over what's happened. You call credits right there, or like, like end us on that swell, and then no more Snyderverse stuff for me at that point. Because that's a good, like, I feel like that's the closest to good that we'll get with it, right? Like, I feel like, it's one of those, like, like, hey, you know what, don't touch it anymore, because at this point, we'll just knock it off the pedestal. Like, that would be a great point for me to leave it. Putting that little epilogue on it, and I don't trust Snyder to do, I don't trust Snyder to do another one of these, because I think that we would get a lot more of, like, playing into, like, the Frank Miller, like, grittier stuff. Without, like, again, kind of understanding the gritty stuff works because it's a contrast to the optimistic, hopeful stuff that we normally get. And when we don't have enough of that to contrast it, it's just a grim version of Superman becoming a more grim version of Superman. And that I'm not interested in seeing. I'd be interested in seeing a different person step in and take this, maybe. Someone who does understand, like, what it is to tell kind of like that type of story.
Well, that raises an interesting question from Hammy in the chat, who says, what's the difference between the Snyderverse and the Flash and Wonder Woman films that are coming out? Aren't they a continuation? Any thoughts on that, Will?
Yeah, so these are all part of the same cinematic universe, but going back to like the comic book world, sometimes you'll have like one person who is like the core writer of one of the core books. Like, I'm the writer who is writing like the X-Men comics or the main Spider-Man comics or whatever, like kind of like the flagship titles happen to be, right? But that person's run isn't going to be forever. Eventually, another writer is going to step in, or other books will exist within that same continuity, but by completely different creative teams, and therefore with very different tones, very different understandings of personality. So the characters may interact with each other because they live in the same town, but they don't necessarily live in the same thematic stories. And so that's the same thing we've got here. The Snyderverse stuff, it's the same Wonder Woman, it's the same Flash, it's the same one, but with different creators who are taking that same thing. You look at something like Aquaman. or Shazam, which was also in the same universe. Both of those movies, I would say Aquaman and Shazam, are both more buoyant movies, I think, than what we have with Snyder. Aquaman really lets Aquaman be a weird wild cat underneath the water, and Shazam plays much more like a family film. And these, again, there was plans for Superman to actually appear in Shazam, and things happened and he didn't. But it was supposed to be, it is in the same world. Yeah, so that's when I say I want the Snyderverse part to end. I don't mean like don't make any more of these movies. I mean, like, I think Snyder as the sort of like the guiding point of the film, of all of the films and sort of the flagship titles. I think that can't help but taint things. That can't help but like kind of ooze out. It makes the world, like the world that all of these stories live in, a little more grim, a little darker than they need to be, even if that's what the other filmmakers don't want. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic, Hammy, because now we're getting into like, this idea of like a multiverse, right, in DC, and they've established that like all of the DC TV shows are happening in their own universes that are separate from the DC movie universe, right? And now we're even going to have different DC movie universes. The Robert Pattinson Batman film that's coming out is going to be in its own separate universe. We have the Jared Leto, Harley Quinn, Ben Affleck, stuff happening. So like obviously two very different Batmans plus Joker.
Right.
Was in its own universe. So like it's all really splintering at this point. They already did Crisis on the TV shows to merge all of the universes down so that you really just have like a couple TV universes in the movieverse. But like who knows what the fuck they're gonna do with the films. I'm choosing to look at the Snyder cut as like an alternate universe, right? And the Joss Whedon film, as unfortunate as it is, I think the Joss Whedon film is the one that's the throughput, right? So, right, Hammy, exactly. So Snyderverse is just to bring Snyder back, restore his creative vision, have it continue from there. I don't know that the studio and then they're going to want to do that per se. I don't know that Snyder wants to do that, to be honest, but we'll see.
I think that Zack Snyder's in a unique spot right now where I think as a creator, probably his best move is to take what is probably like a blank check to do whatever his next projects are that aren't related to this. I think that there's enough people that will bank on the fact of, hey, Zack Snyder got people mobilized on Twitter. Like, love him or hate him. And actually and from a marketing perspective, both of those are actually pretty valid responses, right? Because it gets the hashtag going, gets the traction going. I think that there's probably a lot of like people knocking at his door right now for probably a good number of projects out there. And so I think it would probably behoove him to instead of getting stuck in this one spot where I think he's comfortable there, but I think that he probably has some more opportunities that he can pursue.
Indeed. Well, I'm sure there's a whole lot more that we could say about the Snyder Cut. But believe it or not, we have a whole fucking film festival to talk about. And are you guys feeling ready to make that transition? Maybe put a fork in the Snyder Cut for now. We'll see what comes of the Snyderverse down the road and make that switch.
I'd rather put a trident in it.
But would you be doing like Maui style yelling while you stick the trident in, or like grim and dark grunting while you stick the trident in? Because there's two different trident moments.
What I would be doing is I would be yelling at my teammates, "Yeah!" or "Booyah!" as I'm doing that.
Okay, all right. So quippy trident.
The question is, which song would the people on shore be singing to you as you stick to Triton.
This is not a Oh my god!
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on that moment. What the fuck? All right. Well, folks, thanks so much, all of you in the live chat, for chiming in on our Snyder Cut discussion. Really great hearing your thoughts. We didn't get to read every comment on the show, but definitely following along and love hearing what you think. Thank you so much, Jim. Will, let's do this.
We can't cover that movie properly unless we do a 4-hour podcast anyway. So, half hour is rough.
So that's what we need to hear. Like, if you guys want that, if we can get 10,000 instances, let's say 10,000 instances of hashtag release the movie bears cut, we will do a 4-hour version. I know I'm speaking for you guys right now, but yeah, 10,000 is our number, nothing less. Nothing more. Exactly 10,000. 10,001, we're not doing it. The 10,000 retweets, and we will do a 4-hour Justice League.
There you go. There you go. So Jim, as our Twitter wrangler, you're gonna have to go to our account, which is at MB Podcast, folks. Make a tweet with that hashtag, and we'll see what happens. Hammy says, I'm always down for any 4-hour MBP show. Hammy, we love and adore you. Thank you so much.
I'll get that out there, and I'll count the tweets.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, listen, we got a lot of films to talk about coming out of South by Southwest, and I know we want to talk about the experience too. So we're going to go ahead and make that jump. Here we go. Our discussion of South by Southwest Film Festival 2021. Jim, I have no fucking idea what you're going to drop in.
That's what bumper. I'm like thinking.
I saw your face.
What is he expecting me to do here?
I don't know. They have those like interstitial audio things that they've used in the past. Maybe we can.
They're not easy to come by, but
they gave us permission last year and the year before to use them, and I still have the ones that their media group sent to me, so I can forward that on to you again.
All right.
We'll just use the bumper from last year or something.
Yeah.
But South by Southwest Film Festival happened completely online this year. As we mentioned earlier in the show, we're used to converging on Austin, Texas. Will, of course, you're already there. We camp out at your house. We get to see you and Wiggles and the pups. A bunch of our other friends in the area, Nakia, Rob, Goose, John, Adam, so many people, Dave. But this year was a little bit of a different experience. We had to attend from our own living rooms. We're lucky in that we have a room set up as kind of a makeshift projector room that we could kind of use. Wasn't the same thing as sitting in the Paramount surrounded by 1,017 people, but I mean, it did the trick. We're going to talk about a bunch of different films that we saw, but just very, very briefly. Guys, what was your experience like doing it in person this year? Of course, after it being canceled outright last year, we didn't get to do anything, really, much of anything last year. How did it go?
I mean, as I had talked about at the top of the show, we miss kind of being, with other, film fans, filmmakers, film critics, all kind of in the same place, kind of coming, running into each other in the lobbies or in the queue lines for these movies and talking about what we've seen. What have you seen? That happens now through social media. That is happening online. It doesn't feel like the same thing, but a lot of the same messages do get across. One thing I will say, first of all, is, the quality of films this year was fantastic. We're going to get into that in general. I'm going to talk mostly about some narrative films, but there were some the slate of documentary films this year was fantastic. I thought like just a great lineup, and we'll run through some of those really quickly. But here's the thing: I mean, this was like, whereas physically going to a venue, a movie house, the Paramount or the Stateside or Alamo Drafthouse or wherever we would go to see these films in Austin, that costs time to transport yourself between movies. And here you're sitting in the same room with kind of what's the word I'm looking for? something of riches. What's it called? Like we have a situation where all the movies are in front of us in a an app or a display, and we're able to basically watch movie after movie after movie after movie, which we did. At least I did. The festival is a little more condensed in terms of number of days, I think, because of that. But I can tell you that I watched as many movies in the 5 days of the festival this year as I have in 7 or 8 days of the festival in person. What was astounding me was how the crew and staff at South by Southwest put together such a great user interface experience and access to the films of the festival. Easy access, but also a protected access. So hopefully, there's no pirating or whatever going on. I was just blown away by what they were able to accomplish in putting that out there, allowing us to access to these great films. It was amazing, albeit without the actual contact, in-person contact of a festival.
Yeah, it was interesting because last year, of course, the beginning of the pandemic happens right as, like, when I say beginning of the pandemic, there was some trickling from January and February, but South by Southwest was in March, and March was when everything sort of hit like the fever pitch that we've sort of been on for the last year. And so when they canceled, they didn't get a chance to do what a lot of other festivals got to do, which is do a pivot, because it was like right there. There was no time. And we did get to see, they did like a small partnership with Amazon Prime afterwards and did like a mini South by Southwest there. But, it's like 7 to 10 films. It was like a very small scratching that itch. Over this last year, I've become very good at virtual festivals, and that I did like 9 of them this last year. I was just something like, it's like, at this point, see the silver side of a very, very dark cloud. More and more of these festivals are moving to virtual. And I have to say that big kudos to the South by team for this 2021 setup, because a lot of the other ones that I've been in, the platforms would always have their pluses and their minuses, like I have to deal with this, but then I get that. The South by setup this year was one of the smoothest, if not the smoothest, that I've been a part of. And, every single one of them seems to be kind of building off of the success of the others and kind of working with some of the different festivals. I know that a lot of them collaborate, and they talk and find out, like, what are you using? How did this work? But I have to say, South by Southwest, it was nice. This year, the films were not, with this particular festival, they were released in 2-hour chunks, but once they were released, except for like a couple of the headliner style films, you would watch them at any point during the festival. So it really became a choose your own adventure in a way that a lot of other festivals, you have like a 24-hour window for each block of films. So you really have to okay, if I don't watch this today, I'm going to miss it tomorrow. But here I would be talking and Jim would say, I really liked this. And I'd be like, yeah, I've got an opening tomorrow morning. I guess I'll watch that then and catch up with it. It became a really pleasant experience. I never felt as though I didn't get through half of the movies, but I never felt as though I missed anything that I wanted, because the platform was just that smooth for me to kind of get in and grab the things that I wanted.
Yeah, there was definitely such a great aspect to it. And again, major kudos to Janet Pearson and her team and all the filmmakers who were okay with their films being put online. I did hear from some people, unfortunately, some of the films did get pirated. Some people did watch them that way, and that kind of hurts me in my heart, because they're like, oh my God, I saw this film festival, film that I would have had to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to see, but I saw it on Kodi or whatever. And that makes me very, very bummed. But I'm glad a few bad apples didn't spoil the bunch. And actually, in a way, doing it this way worked out better for me. I know I've talked about it on South by episodes in years past, but it's like when we go to Austin, because my workplace is also in Austin, I typically work during the day, and then I'll see films with you guys at night, except for the 2 weekends, bridging that week. But a lot of the things that I really want to see premiere during the day, and then their repeat airings are only during the day, and I end up not getting to see the things that I really, really want to hit. So this year, with it having being a virtual setup and having them be available, after sort of that like release time frame, I was able to see pretty much everything that I went through and singled out for myself. Of course, I signed up for more things, than I was able to see. I tried to give those things up so that other people could get in and see them when I knew I couldn't make it. But I think I actually saw more films this year than I have in years past, which is kind of amazing. So that's not to say that I want this to be virtual every year, but like if they wanted to do a blended model where they had in-person showings and things like more of these things available in an online library, fuck, I would love that so much. So Janet Pearson, if you or someone from your team is watching and you would consider that, that would be fantastic, because I just have limited time off. I wish I could take that whole week off. I can't always do that. So that would be really cool. But this was a great experience, being able to watch these films with, cats in my lap. We made our own popcorn. We bought our own snacks. Definitely a bummer we didn't get to, be patrons of Alamo Draft House and Paramount and support those wonderful local businesses in Austin. But I think, as silver linings go, we found some really good ones in this festival. So I'm glad we got to do that for sure. So, guys, I think now is a great time to maybe talk about some of the standout films. Of course, let me just say up front, everybody, we're not going to spoil these films for you. Many of these may not even have distribution deals yet. Who knows when they'll be available in theaters or on streaming, or even if they'll be available. Sometimes films don't get picked up, but we're gonna call some things out that we liked. We'll talk very generally about why. Jim, Will, are you on board with the hashtag No Spoiler Pact?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Normally, we're okay with doing like a blended, like no spoiler thing, because we talk about films generally like a week after they've come out. And so there are people that will have seen it and can hang out. But in this case, probably most people listening did not get a chance to go to this festival. So yeah, like we'll keep it spoiler free. We'll keep it clean, keep it good. You're safe. This is a safe movie place.
Think of it this way. This is going to be a 23-minute and 40-second plugs section for things that may be coming your way at some point. So we're going to keep this very light and free form. We're not going to round robin it where each person gets a couple minutes to talk about a film, because who the fuck wants to do that? Let's just have a discussion. What did you like? What was the standout for you guys?
I was putting my list together and I noticed that there's a thread here in the many of the films that I liked, especially the narrative films. I kind of have two piles: narrative films and documentary films. And as you know, in past years at South by Southwest, we've gotten to interview LGBT filmmakers at the Agliff Brunch that was held as kind of an offshoot of South by Southwest, when there were LGBT filmmakers or films in South by Southwest. And those films were there again in spades this year. I'm going to talk about a few of those. Right off the top of the bat, one I fell in love with was a film called Swan Song. And this is a film with Udo Kier. And I don't know a lot about Udo Kier. I know he's an infamous actor. He's an infamous actor. Character, outspoken, and he in this movie he plays a flamboyant hairdresser who escapes from a nursing home, and basically travels across this small town where he once has a business to style the hair of one of his older regular clients who's deceased. None of that is a spoiler. That's all in the synopsis. But I fell in love with the character. I fell in love with the story. Some of the touches. I think our audience would most likely love this movie if it gets some kind of distribution. And this film is directed and written by a guy named Todd Stevens, who wrote the movies that I didn't really like, called the Another Gay Movie
Yes.
series, which I didn't like those, but this was tonally different, I think, than those, and really poignant and funny. Some good stuff here.
Jim, they did have, in their defense, they did have Richard Hatch's penis in them. So, I mean, there's that if you're a Survivor fan.
That's right. This movie, I don't recall if I don't think it had Richard Hatch's penis in it.
No.
I won't mention if it has any penis in it, but yeah, it's
That's a fun pick, Jim, too, just because Udo Kier he's like a character actor who's like, he's known for being in kind of like weird parts. I mean, dude shows up in Blade, dude shows up in like Puppet Master. He's like, he was in Baccarat, which was one of my favorite movies of last year, but playing like a weird, intense part.
Like a villain, right?
Yeah. And so it's not always that he plays villains, but he's a character actor. And so it was sort of nice seeing him play a gentler character, a character like this seemed like it was like the most like acting flex that Udo Kier has kind of put into a role because it's so different than what he normally plays. And so that was a hell of a fun watch.
Yeah. And, some other films with some LGBT credit. I'm sorry if I'm stealing some mentions from you guys, because we didn't really compare notes. A movie called The Fallout was a standout for me.
This is free form, if we feel like you're stealing something, we'll jump in and talk.
Okay, yeah. The Fallout, probably the standout of the festival this year. This is a drama. A high schooler navigates the emotional fallout. There you go. That word again. In the wake of a school tragedy, and her relationships are forever altered. This one was written and directed by Megan Park, and it stars Jenny Ortega in just an amazing performance, I thought, in this film. This film was right up my alley. Like I said, probably the best thing I saw at the festival this year. I don't know if you guys saw that one
for a second. Yeah, because it was also my standout. It was my number one film overall. You've got Jenna Ortega in this, and we've seen her before in like Iron Man 3 and Insidious Chapter 2, and she was in this really quirky, weird movie called Worm, but like WYRM. It's super good. This is a hell of a performance. I mean, she's like 18, 19 right now, something like that. But she's playing a high school girl who's like in the aftermath of this like school shooting tragedy. That's it's about. But it's not just her. We also have Maddie Ziegler, like the girl that's known for Dancing with Sia, is in it. And she's so good. All of the kids are so good in this. Julie Bowen, the mom from Modern Family, is the mom in this, and she's so good. Mm-hmm. It's hard to find a movie that feels like it would both resonate with like the youth of right now, like people like an age appropriate audience for this, while also resonating with like me as like, a dude who is very far removed from high school, and doesn't have those same experiences, but everything felt so fresh and everything felt so timely, but also felt so like universal while also being specific. Hell of a good movie. I think The Fallout is absolutely just as far as all the narrative films go, and there's a lot of really good ones, but it's the one that I keep coming back to.
Yeah, I believe The Fallout won the narrative competition at South by Southwest Film this year, and I mean, absolutely for good reason. It's a phenomenal film. Jim, you saw it before I got a chance to, but I did end up catching up with that one, and I was just completely blown away by that movie.
Yeah.
I don't know, just major kudos to the filmmakers and the actors. Some pretty heavy emotional beats in that film without giving anything away. And I know we have a ton of movies to talk about, so I don't want to spiral forever into this film, but like I would take my hat off to it if I weren't wearing headphones that it would dislodge.
Yeah. And, I think everyone should probably see this film. I think it's, something it's got things to say, although it doesn't hit you over the head with anything. I don't think it proposes to have any answers to what's going on in society today. But the only thing that kind of would work against this movie in terms of getting it out to the masses is that it is a heavy film. It is harsh subject matter, and that isn't going to play with anybody. But sometimes we got to face harsh realities to understand the lessons, and this is one of those films. And I also loved the kind of ambiguous possible LGBT angle in this film. Like it was just the way it was played. I thought it was wonderful. It didn't feel like it had to come to any answers. And that was beautiful, I thought. Another one is called that I really loved was called I'm Fine, Thanks for Asking. This film was a huge surprise. Directed, written, and starring Kelly Cayley. I think that's how you pronounce that name. It's about a recently widowed young mother becomes houseless. This is the second time we've heard this term this year. I won't spoil the other one. And she has an 8-year-old daughter, and they're like camping out to try to survive on the streets. And this reminded me a lot of a movie called Florida Project a little bit. Just kind of the way it draws you into this way of life that many of us are from, we know about, but we're not necessarily familiar with, and we don't feel. This movie makes you feel it, and I give everything to this movie for that. So I thought this was a wonderful film. Will, Brad, I don't know if you both saw it.
I watched this one with you, so I did see this one, and it was funny. I was starting work for the day as you were starting that movie. I just finished having breakfast, and thankfully it was one of those days where I wasn't actively teaching a class or anything, so my schedule was a little bit flexible. And you started watching this movie, and I was hooked right out of the gate with this whole camping out thing. They're houseless. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to watch 10 minutes of this. And I ended up watching the whole movie with you. And it was really great, especially from a film made during COVID angle, right? Seeing characters, and this is in the trailer. I just checked. It's not a spoiler. Seeing characters wearing masks as they're going about, taking masks off when they step far enough away from each other. I wouldn't do that, but some people do. It was interesting to see how maybe COVID played a role, not just in the filmmaking, but being acknowledged, right? As a year in our lives where things are happening. So really, really cool to see.
There are there are a few COVID movies out right now where the attention is drawn to those aspects of the film, and that's totally valid. It's the type of thing that you make film about because it's a very important part of what we've all experienced. But what I like so much about this movie, it's probably one of my favorite COVID films in that it never drew attention to itself. It just existed during the time. At no point did anyone say by the way, it's the pandemic. It's
right. We're about COVID. Masks. Right.
Yeah. It was just sort of a backdrop to these other things. This movie also reminded me so much. I love this one too, Jim. So it's a good pick. It reminded me a lot of Tangerine, which is one of my absolute favorite movies.
Tangerine as well.
Mainly because it's a film about a character who's sort of going through it's a compressed period of time, just sort of one day as she is navigating around on foot trying to accomplish some things. And it really makes you feel some movies you jump in the plane with them and fly across country and all of this stuff, but you feel you're walking, or I guess rollerblading, every step of these streets with this main character.
Were they rollerblades or roller skates, now that I think of it?
I think they're roller skates.
Skates, maybe.
Yeah. You don't see that very often, but that was really cool.
It did make me want to try to roller skate again. It's been 20 years. I don't know what would happen. But there's some other films too that kind of were standouts for me. One of them we talked about on our last episode, Clerk, by filmmaker Malcolm Ingram, who's part of the Bear community and just is a tremendous documentarian. Clerk was all about the life and career of legendary filmmaker Kevin Smith. So if you want to know more about that, just tune in to our last episode, hear Malcolm talk about that film. Another one for me that was a huge standout that I didn't necessarily think going in would be like my favorite movie of the last 2 years, but somehow became my favorite movie of the last years. That's Language Lessons, starring Mark Duplass. A film almost entirely shot over like a fucking Zoom call about a man, and this is in the trailer, who goes through a loss in his life, and the person that he loses bought him a bunch of language lessons with someone to help him improve his Spanish. And he develops sort of not a relationship, but just like a bond with this person. And they're talking back and forth over thousands of miles. And there's some heavy moments in this one. There's some really cool, lighthearted stuff. I also have been brushing up on my Spanish. About 6 months ago, Rosetta Stone had like a lifetime thing you could buy for like all languages. So I bought it and I started with Spanish. So it was really cool, like closing my eyes sometimes, just listening to them speak in Spanish without reading the subtitles and seeing how much I could naturally pick up. Sometimes I had to rewind it and like open my eyes because I wanted to see their expressions,
Yeah.
But it was a really cool experience, and like it didn't draw attention to like COVID being a thing. It didn't say, oh, well, we got to do these language lessons over Zoom because there's a pandemic on. It had like a natural built-in story reason, right? Being separated by thousands of miles, it being a remote class. So, so much heart in this movie. I cried. I laughed my ass off. I got really mad. I mean, it made me feel a lot of things. So fucking good.
Yeah, and this is one of those films where it's like a masterclass in character and storytelling,
Right.
because it's all done through, there's no act, there's really no actions in this movie. It's just two characters interrelating with each other, and you learn so much. There's so much character development throughout this movie that's like it's barely an hour and a half long, and it tells a real story about both characters. So I was amazed. It reminded me a little bit of some of Mark Duplass's horror movies, actually. Even though this is not a horror movie,
This is not the Creep universe. Yeah,
it's not in the. I was wondering for a while because it kind of has that feeling, because Creep is all shot. A lot of it is shot through like a video camera, I think. So it kind of had that same feel, like a captured character or a captured subject.
Well, especially as, when we see found footage as a genre, which is what Creep was, and, used to be like, someone carrying around a camera, but a lot of it has bled into like online spaces, like Zoom calls, especially this last year. But yeah, Language Lessons is the goods. Natalie Morales is the stars opposite him, and
She's
also directed
amazing.
the film. Yeah, and there's just such a confidence. Like I've seen a few of these, like it happens on Zoom style movies now, and this is the first one where I really like. It didn't feel gimmicky. It felt like the distance between these two characters as they connected over this virtual space was the point. And it was really used to like maximum advantage.
Fuck yeah, this was no unfriended, thank God.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah, there were a couple that really stood out for me too. I mean, honestly, you guys have talked about a few of the ones that were really high up for me. One that's a bit of a zig or a zag or whatever we want to call it, kind of from the emotional through line of some of the ones that we've talked about here, is a movie I watched and loved called The Spine of Night. This is an animated fantasy epic. Think sort of like heavy metal. Think like kind of like a rotoscope style. If you watch any of like the Joel Haver videos on YouTube, it kind of looks like that. So The Spine of Night is like, it follows like this storyline over like not just like one story, but like over like a century or centuries, and just all of the characters that kind of weave in and out of this like one connected story through these little individual stories. It is intense. It is bloody as fuck when they fight. Like, people are just bleeding all over the place. One of the main characters for the longest bit is she's like a shaman from like the swamps, and she is just completely nude, just walking around doing her stuff. That's Lucy Lawless plays that role. Joe Manganiello is in this. Richard E. Grant, Patton Oswalt. I really like this. If you like fantasy shit like I do, if you like heavy metal, like The Spine of Night is the goods. It's a rad movie.
Yeah, well, I saw this one. And like it's not in my wheelhouse, but like I found it like mesmerizing, like to watch this movie, because it's so different than, I mean, I've seen these different videos and clips and stuff like that online, but a whole movie like this, and just it's balls out, like literally and figuratively, attitude and storytelling was pretty awesome.
I found a few like tearjerker documentaries too that sort of like, I don't know, they found me in the spot where I needed to be, and sometimes that's what's great about a festival. And the two that I'd like to flag are Not Going Quietly, which is a documentary about Adi Barkan, who is an activist who is, he comes down with ALS, young age. He's 32 and he's just had a baby. He and his wife have just had a baby, and he decides, he has to make the decision, like, am I going to keep going out and doing my activist stuff, or am I going to spend like the time that I've left with the body that I've left, at home with my family? And it's a very harrowing story of courage and of sacrifice and of just, I don't know what it means to sort of be bigger than yourself. And I mean, you'll cry. It's an intense movie, Not Going Quietly.
I saw that one too, Will, and just like the fortitude of this person, and following something through and having those convictions, even though your physical life at least, is like literally falling apart on you, like you're losing your faculties. Like he knows he's losing his voice, like he cannot speak and cannot move at some point. So no spoilers, but to watch that happen is just like rips your heart out. But it's also it is very strengthening, you know what I mean, to watch that, to watch him through that, and the messages, and basically he's carrying a message, for healthcare, for affordable healthcare to us all. I mean, that's what he's doing. Probably one of the least able-bodied of us is doing the vast majority of the work when it comes to that. So that's pretty incredible.
And then there's this. Oh, go ahead, Brad.
No, go ahead. Well, go for it.
I was going to say, and then there was one other documentary, and it sort of feels like it occupies a similar space. But again, I was probably in the right headspace for these, maybe because I've been doing some medical stuff lately too, and the healthcare system's a little broken, and I'm getting to see that a little more firsthand than than I had known before. But there was this movie called Introducing Selma Blair.
Yes.
And it's about Selma Blair, like the actress. You probably remember her as she is in Legally Blonde as the antagonist character. She's the one that kisses Sarah Michelle Gellar in Cruel Intentions. She's the romantic lead who can make fire come out of her hands in the Hellboy movies. That's Selma Blair. Well, she's stepped back away from acting because she's come down with MS just as of a few years ago. And this documentary follows her on her journey as she looks for this sort of like maybe like I don't want to say experimental, but this promising treatment thing. It follows her kind of like in the lead up to that, what happens there, kind of the aftermath, all of that. And it's another one of these stories of just like, courage, and like, it's harrowing to see just what someone has to go through. And, you find yourself like just very, feeling very like fortunate, no matter what's going on right now, like, I have certain other things going for me, and that's, you feel bad about feeling good about that, but anyways. But the other thing that's so great about this documentary is Selma Blair. The camera loves Selma Blair. Like, she is like this charismatic ball of energy the entire film. And so whenever it follows, the whole thing follows her, but as she's talking, it's just, you can't help but be just like drawn in and entertained. Like, sometimes a documentary is as good as its subject. And Selma Blair turns into just like one of the most fascinating subjects ever. She's very much a warts and all open book with this, which I think you need to be to kind of be successful for this type of story. I went into it not really. I went into it not sure if I was going to like it, because I sometimes I feel when you have like an issue movie like that, but about someone famous, they feel very guarded and you don't really get the true story. But this one, no. She really invites you into her world. I loved introducing Selma Blair. It was definitely in one of my like when I was doing like my top 3, introducing Selma Blair, a movie that wasn't immediately on my radar, shot into one of those spots.
Yeah, Will, that was such a great documentary, and it's really hard to talk about this one without giving spoilers. And I know spoilers are kind of a weird thing for documentaries anyway, because like you could go online and read all about Selma Blair and her journey and what's going on with her. But I would almost encourage you not to do that and wait till you can see this, because even though it is very heavy, there's some poignant, uplifting stuff too, even about, you know, how we deal with tragedy and as human beings, right? Like how resilient is her spirit. So totally a phenomenal film. I know we're rapidly running out of time. Guys, maybe we even do a second South by episode at some point, because I know there's a whole lot more movies that we want to talk about that we just haven't gotten to. But one that I would feel criminal for not bringing up before we wrap is actually a film that is lovely and full of light and horror. And that, of course, is Alien on Stage, another documentary which follows an acting troupe in the UK that basically puts on, you know, for charity, their homespun version of Alien on stage. You know, they create the consoles on the ships. They create a homemade alien costume. You know, it's like if little kids were to like create things out of
a
cardboard,
school play, yeah,
you know, to make a school play of Alien, but like they're adults with like, you know, better skills at building things. That would be the Alien that you get. And you know, it originally premiered, and I don't want to give away spoilers, so I'm not going to say anything more. But it was really neat to see sort of the journey toward like putting that production together, how it came about, what happened with it, how they made some of the costumes and the set pieces. And Will, I know both you and I have a background having done some acting in school and community theater. It totally took me back to those days of like just, you know, working with the stage folks and the prop people, just putting this shit together to try and make it look good. And you know, something that you like work your ass off to be amazing, and then it ends up being maybe like unintentionally funny, but then like that's the best thing about the whole thing, you know. Yeah, it was such a treat.
I gotta ask you guys, you know, because you both have kind of an amateur, maybe even professional, I don't know, theater background. Did you feel the thriller aspect of this movie? Like as they're putting the production together, you're like, oh my fucking God, how is this going to end up?
Yes,
like,
yes.
Like I am like anxious for these. You could tell some of the people were anxious and some of them weren't, which made me even more anxious. Like, how are you not like nervous for this production?
That's the thing. So I was always like, you know, I'm the type of actor. I was on. I didn't do crew, so I don't have that experience. But I was always the guy who was like, you know, first day of rehearsals, you got to be off book. Like that's the type of, you guys know I'm tightly wound. So I think
we all are a little bit.
Yeah. So I would apply those exact things. And, you know, with some productions, everyone else is. And in some productions, they aren't. And then you start having these like, oh God, this is never going to come together. And the truth of the matter is it always comes together. Production always comes together, but you are living that hell in that moment of just like the what ifs and like the every day gets you closer to opening night. And, you know, like, is this going to be ready? Do we get this? And so I was reliving all of that, like kind of like stress and all of that to the point where like, so I still have dreams to this day. Like,
yes,
often often I don't have the whole I forgot to turn in an assignment ones, like the ones where it's like,
a combination to your locker.
Yeah, it's time to do a math class and I forgot there was going to be a test. I don't have those. I have a lot of dreams regularly where I go out on stage and someone says, okay. And I'm like, but I just got the script. And they're like, no, it's time now. And I have to know the lines that I haven't had a chance to study. So when specifically that's a production. It's a movie about a production. There's a scene where they're going over their lines and some people are kind of in different spots of it, and I felt that to my bones and my core. I felt that so much.
It's so interesting that you bring up the dreams, because I have a lot of anxiety dreams about many things. I'm an anxious person, but I haven't had theater related dreams in a really long time. Then I saw this movie and I had this dream where it was time to go out on stage and sing my song, my show stopping song, and I get out there and the song that they're playing is a different song than the one that I know the words to and have rehearsed. And so I'm watching this audience looking at me and they're all bored and what the fuck and why isn't he singing? And so I start in the dream doing this interpretive dance thing. That's what it's supposed to be this whole time.
The show must go on.
And the director comes out on stage and just stops the show and is like, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to refund all your money. And this dream, I keep having pieces of it every few nights ever since I saw Alien on stage. So, Jim, to answer your question, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm watching them.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm watching them try to learn their lines. I'm watching that poor director try to get people to even though it's not a serious thing, take it seriously in terms of the stagecraft and getting everything together. But it was really neat to kind of see that process represented in a documentary like this. So
I hadn't heard a lot about this production or certainly this film, but this production, but apparently it kind of had it was kind of out there and some people may know about it. I would recommend if you see this movie, go into it without knowing anything else. I would say go in cold. I think it's the best experience. And I think that's going to be one of the best things about, these festivals is as these films do get some kind of release, we on the show can plug, these shows being released and available to people who follow us and are interested in the films. So I'm excited about that.
That's a really good point, Jim. For example, there's a whole section for Midnighters here, and I probably watched about 2/3 of those movies. I go hard on the Midnighters because that's what I like. Knowing kind of the atmosphere and things, a good number of these are probably going to get picked up by Shudder because Shudder is an amazing service for finding these horror movies and getting them out there. And so I will try to make it a point to just as we get closer to those Shudder releases, just saying oh, by the way, here's a thing to look out for. And that's just one example. Netflix is going to get their hand on the ball. Hulu. YouTube has already, they're putting out the Demi Lovato headliner film. So there's a lot of places you can watch movies out there. There were a lot of movies here. So, yeah, we've got our fingers right on that pulse, don't we, guys?
We really do. And I know we're kind of out of time, but just a couple more films I want to throw out there. Maybe we'll talk about them more if we do another South by episode. A movie called, and I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to say the names. Another heavy film, Islands, was exceptional, exquisite, so fucking good. And as documentaries go, docs aren't typically my zen zone. But Lily Topples the World tickled me to no end about a girl who makes amazing things out of dominoes and is just an amazing person. Will, I wasn't gonna show mine, but since you started showing yours, I was like, is it a spoiler? I don't know. But Lily, we have your domino sets. So if you happen to be watching the Movieers podcast, Will and I are gonna sit on the floor watching cartoons, drinking chocolate milk, making domino creations together, and it's gonna be amazing. So thank you for that, Lily Hevish. We appreciate you.
Oh, you guys are adorable.
How about for you guys? Just real quick, rapid fire, maybe just a couple more movies to put on folks' radar.
Jim?
All right, I'm going to give you one that is a thriller that I thought was really well done, called Here Before. This was a really like tight psychological thriller set in Northern Ireland. This one stars Andrea Riseborough, who we've seen in many things. This is about I'll just say family tensions and a family dealing with loss and some strange things that start happening. Well, I don't know if this falls into the category of like a Midnighter. I guess it could. But it definitely has that psychological edge where you don't know what's going on here. But yeah, Here Before. And then the only other one, really quick, a movie called Recovery. It's a comedy road trip. Sisters on a comedy road trip.
Awesome.
Recovery is really good. It's got gosh, now I'm forgetting the name of the movie that came out just Olivia Wilde. Booksmart.
Yes.
It has Booksmart vibes, and it made me laugh just as much, if not more. Recovery is
I think
really
more.
funny.
Yeah.
Here Before, like you mentioned, Andrea Riseborough is just absolutely stellar. This is not quite a Midnighter, but it's adjacent. It is definitely a great what's going on thriller. There's a music doc called Polystyrene, I Am a Cliche, about polystyrene of X-Ray Specs from the UK punk scene. Fascinating individual, really good documentary about her. And then there's a movie called In the Same Breath, which is a heavy documentary to watch for this last year, but it follows Nanfu Wang, who is the director of this. She also did One Child Nation, got like Oscar nominated for it. So this will likely show up on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon very soon. She's a director with some clout. As a Chinese documentarian, she follows, she was like in Wuhan kind of during the early parts of the pandemic, but she's also a stateside. She lives stateside with her husband. So she got to follow both sides of what was happening. And the film really follows like just how much propaganda happened with kind of both governments from completely different directions and which way they went, but in terms of how they handled the pandemic. So it's one of those things. It might feel like we're a little bit too close to it right now, but it's still like, I would say damn near essential viewing, especially, as we get a little further away from this, to sort of catalog just all the stuff that happened along the way. So those are my rapid fires.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the rapid fires, folks. I know it's hard to not jump into talking about some of these other films at length. Again, maybe we'll do another South by bonus episode or something at some point. But just want to give a huge shout out to Janet Pearson and all of the folks who made South by Southwest Film 2021 possible. From the folks who worked on the coding for the platform that allowed us to watch these movies, to the incredible filmmakers who shared their phenomenal stories with us, to the actors, to the crews on these films, and to everybody who supported film festivals. In a fucking pandemic where we can't necessarily go to movie theaters, it's really hard to continue to do these things. But thank you to everybody who supported financially and helped get the word out about South by. We love South by so much, and we're so happy to see it continue and be part of it. So Hamstrack real quick says definitely need to watch another round of MBP South by Southwest. Yeah, Hammy, I'm kind of getting that feeling too. Will and Jim and I can talk about it. Maybe we'll see if we can plug something in somewhere. But I've got at least 4 more movies I wanted to talk about that I haven't talked about yet. So totally get that for sure. But real quick, guys, as we wrap up here, in case anybody wants to chat more about South by Southwest between now and when we may do a bonus episode if we do. Jim, where can people interact with you and chat online?
You'll find my tweets out there in the Twitterverse. My handle there is at JJP Out West. My initials JJP Out West, all one word. And also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico, which is right here.
Awesome. Yes. For those of you who are watching the video, you can see that on screen. If you're not watching the video, let me see if I can remember how to spell this because I'm married to you. Pul, my eyes are closed, IAFICO.
You got it. You got it.
Yes. I would hope so after 12 years of being together. Will, where can people interact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove, which is right here on the screen. Poke, poke, poke. I'm random on Twitter. Sometimes I'm talking about movie stuff. Sometimes I'm shit posting. Whatever. Most of the time, I'm just following Cinnamon Toast Shrimp news these days. But you can find me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis there, which is also right here because it's my name. Just send me a request so I know that you're a real person and not one of the random bots that have taken an interest in me lately. You can also follow me on Letterboxd. Just search for William Lindis. Give me a follow. I log every movie that I've watched there. So if that interests you, give me a follow. I'll follow you back.
All right, excellent. And folks, you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro, as well as on Letterboxd under the same name. It's also here on the screen. I always have trouble doing this in reverse.
Yeah,
because
the mirrored
on
image
screen,
is
it's
like,
flipped. Yeah. But again, that's at iBradPro, like iPad Pro, but with Brad. You can also find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one that is a husky, hairy, huggable homo. It's pretty easy to tell that it's me from my profile picture, not the skinny, gun-toting, Confederate flag-bearing guy that I unfortunately share a namesake with.
He's probably mean anyway.
He looks like an asshole. He looks like an asshole. I'm just going to put that out there.
So not asshole profile.
Exactly.
That's the one you want.
Exactly. But big, huge thanks to everybody who joined us on the show this week through our live chat. R2 James's, Hamstracked. It was great having all of you in the chat with us. We had a bunch of folks who were hanging out too. That were part of the discussion. Bat Super, I don't know your real name, but always good to see some new names show up in the chat too. So folks, don't forget you can access our back catalog of episodes on our website, moviebearspodcast.com. Also, this is episode 398 of MBPs. So fellas, we're coming up on the big 400 in just a couple episodes. So if we do a bonus South by episode, that's 399. So then our 400 would have to be something really special. I don't know.
Well, but we also have Godzilla Kong maybe kind of in the mix coming up too. So
so
that's next week.
So bonus South by and then Godzilla versus Kong is 400. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll talk about it. We'll figure out what our plan is. But thank you everyone so much for being with us. We will see you all next time. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.